Welcome to Higher Ed Athletics, presented by Pilotics. Today, I'm joined by Sean Frazier, the Vice President and Athletic Director at Northern Illinois. Sean, thanks for being on Higher Ed Athletics.
I appreciate it, Travis. You do good work, man. I was excited about the invite and also too to be a part of your very important subject matter that you're dealing with right now, especially in the college landscape.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I was recently at the Toledo game, and we found out that it was also against Northern Illinois, so I got to meet up with you. So that was really cool to kind of see you and Brian both together. So I want to first start with, I think the biggest thing that everybody thinks about NIU right now is this move from football to the Mountain West, and then the other sports to the Horizon. So can you maybe just talk about like the decision to do that, and then what was kind of what kind of made you want to operationally make that make sense?
Well, there's a lot to it, and I'll put something in the chat for you too as well that really talks a little bit about what some of the decision making that went along with that. A lot went along with that, and we've put together a PowerPoint heavily data centric as well as historical to kind of take us through, the decision making both for the Mountain West and Horizon League. It goes through alumni representation. It goes through a number of different pieces that maybe we can't get through this verbalization of description. But the bottom line was resources. I think there's no mystery that to be able to operate an FBS athletic department these days, you've got to have a finite a number of dollars to be able to do that, and that can't come necessarily off the backs of the institution. It has to be subsidized through philanthropy. It has to be done with creative innovation around, private capital or sponsorship or multimedia rights. There's a number of different buckets that need to be a part of the process. And for us, it's always been like that. I don't remember a time where we were so-called completely funded to be able to operationalize that. And that's not just here at NIU, that's at a lot of places that look like NIU relative to the financial dollars that we have from the state, federal, private, and what have you. So this was really motivated on that. But then it was also motivated specifically around competition and the quality of experience for our student athletes and positioning our university to be competitive in the new era that we're seeing right now. At some point, we're going to say it's not the new era, it's the era, because honestly, we've been involved with this or leading up to this. The only thing that was new is that we've actually got the House settlement in place for the next decade, and that we understand that the rules of engagement relative to NIL, rev share, and the transfer portal. So we have those pieces in play, and that really changed our decisions and the way that we operate, and it still continues to do that, right? People are buying their rosters, people are poaching kids, people are doing things that are very very pro-like in the model. What's not pro-like is this quasi environment that we have, is that we have also a number of sports within the portfolio, not just one or two like a professional a team would have or franchise would have. We have multiple, in our case, 17 programs. So that's that quasi way of saying that we have a more professionalized model, because we really don't. We have a model that is new. It is different. It has elements of professional. It has elements of amateurism, but it's not. So we're kind of working this through. But the real process for us was taking a look at our football program and the success that we've had in the MAC, um, our longstanding success, and then taking a look at our Olympic sports specifically, and then our centering around our men's, women's basketball, and making sure that we have more of a regional approach with our Olympics to be able to control the operational funding across the board. We also have our wrestling team that's landed in the Pac-12, so we had a couple of sports that fell out of the portfolio, the horizon, that are going to participate in the Pac-12, and then also to our gymnastics, women's gymnastics team in the Mountain West. So, with all that said, we looked at the numbers, we looked at the finances, we looked at the connectivity for all of our stakeholders, and we said, this is a good move. And it was a model that, quite frankly, that we hadn't developed or created on our own. This is something that the service academy, specifically Army and Navy, have been doing for a very long time. Hawaii was doing this with the Mountain West, having football only, and then having their sports in another California-based conference. So we looked at that from a research standpoint and said, let's drill that down. Let's take a look at that. And we quickly found out that many folks have said, Sean, if you can get that done, that's a great deal. The real issue is, can you get that done? And how do you position yourself to make sure it works, that everyone is comfortable at the end of the day? So that's what happened there. And then we had obviously great leadership, our president, our board of trustees, our other stakeholders that supported the process, and we've executed it. And lo and behold, here it is. And we actually start participating in that model next year, FY26. And we're having our last year now in the MAC, and we're going through that process. So that's a quick way. If you ask me some more questions about why the idea popped up, I could drill down on why and when and all that. But basically, it was out of the necessity to financially support our programs and to give our institution a shot to continue to be competitive.
Yeah, does it make like the football scheduling? So once you switch over, is there, I don't know, I mean I know scheduling contracts go so far out, but I mean what kind of mess or opportunity now lies with your non-conference? Do you think you all will be able to kind of keep some of the like any anticipation of keeping a MAC school or a regional approach at least with your non-conference for football?
Absolutely, absolutely, not just in football too. I think that, I love my ADs in the MAC. They're fantastic. They're great administrators. They're good people. They're in it for the right reasons. They've been battle tested. So yeah, those relationships will continue. Uh, and I look forward to that. And a number of them have already reached out about continuing, those scheduling, football included, obviously. But taking a look at from a regional standpoint with Western and Ball State and Toledo, and there's enough there where it makes no sense for us to say, oh no, we're not going to schedule anymore. This wasn't we don't like the MAC move. This was a move for sustainability. This was a move to make sure that we can continue to have an FBS athletic department and able to have the resources necessary. We fundraise for food in the refrigerator and to keep the lights on. That's the reality of what we do here at NIU. We're really proud of that, but at the end of the day, we have to keep the main thing. And that basically is that we've got to be able to subsidize what the institution, state, federal, cannot give us. So this was done specifically to help our student athletes in our institution. The scheduling model, we would love to do that. We don't have anything on the docket right now, but we will continue to do that as we kind of open up the scheduling. We're kind of getting with our partners with the Horizon, getting with our partners with the Mountain West, and making sure we fit those things in first. And then there's going to be options and availability, and then we're going to fill it from that end. So it's not over with scheduling schools in the MAC. It's really more about how do we go about it right now to make it work.
So potentially no more of those, Tuesday, Wednesday night November games for football. Because I don't know that Mountain West is doing that, but is that something that you'll kind of miss that MACtion experience for football?
To be perfectly honest with you, MACtion, was not in the cards for us to eradicate, right? We do know that it hurts our fan base, and I'm very, very cognizant about that. I do believe there's a shelf life with MACtion, and I think that's the leadership is going to have to figure that one out. I
Well, they
think
kind
for
of
us,
started as like the first, right? And then now like
yeah.
you've got almost every night of the week, there's football, whether NFL or college. And because I mean, I stopped at the Georgia State South Alabama game to see Charlie Cobb on my way back through Atlanta, and it was like a
Mm.
Thursday night game, and there was like another Sun Belt game going on. I mean, it's almost like y'all started this trend, and then now it's might oversaturate potentially if it hasn't already.
Yeah, but the to consume college football, people will watch it. If you have college football on Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday, people are going to watch it. So I get
Guilty,
the
guilty. I'll watch.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
sicko. I'll watch the Hawaii game on if I don't have anywhere early to be the next day.
yeah. Well, no, it's true, and I think that there is a marketplace for it. But again, the traditionalists, the purists want to play on Friday or Saturday, what have you. But I think they're going to have to figure that out as we move forward. We're excited about moving into the Mountain West for a lot of different reasons that are not just because of not playing on Tuesday and Wednesday night, but again, Will I miss it from an operational standpoint? No. I think I'd be sitting here lying to you about that. It's a big challenge to get folks butts in the seats Tuesday and Wednesday nights. There's no question about that. Especially if your financial model requires that ticket ticket taking and ticket operation and revenues and all that is a part of it, which it is. So that part, no. But will I miss the overall excitement and the ability? You saw what Brian Blair did with Toledo. You know, he sold that thing out and he got it done. His staff got it done. So kudos to what he did. But I'm quite sure if you ask him, was that a heavy lift? I'm gonna let him answer that. It looked like by the staff that he has assembled that it was a heavy lift for them to execute that. But he did a wonderful job, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, it's one thing if it's like an August or September thing, but we're talking about the Midwest in November. It's not for the soft-hearted people. I mean, it's rough. I mean, I was struggling. I had to go up to the suites at halftime because I was so cold. I felt like a wimp, but I was like, I'm not from Ohio, man. I can't do this. Like
It's all good,
Indianapolis and
brother.
Ohio, it's a little different still. That's what I tell
Mhm.
people. I was like, I'm not that far east. So, and we're pretty far up north too. I kept forgetting where I was at.
Yep.
About the whole switch though, I know the Horizon League really well. I'm a IUPUI alum, now IU
Did.
Indianapolis,
Yep.
which it's kind of funny just for a side note is people will say like they're upset with the name change. Pretty sure that diploma right there, IUPUI, it says Indiana University. The only thing that says Indianapolis on it is the city and state. So
Hmm.
IUPUI was not on any of our degrees. So,
Mm.
but still, I'm excited about the IU Indianapolis change. But the Horizon League is wide open for a lot of sports, and so it just makes like a good sense for me for you all. And I think you're gonna have some good opportunities at the size of your school too. So I think it was the way you kind of explained it to me now and off air. I think it was just makes the most sense in the world. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. Um, I am kind of thinking about biggest concerns from you about the AD profession in the future. So I know you're really a scholar too, and so you can speak to that. But I mean, you study this profession. I've only been studying it for like 5 years. But what is your biggest concerns when you think about the actual athletic director position? You can kind of take it any way you want to go with it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. It's one that we, as practitioners who are actually doing the job, is one that we have to review on a daily basis. And me, being an active officer and now president for this particular year, it's something that's incumbent on myself to be a student, be a tool of education, and also to be able to help out others in the profession as they're kind of evaluating, do they really want to get into this, right? It's really changed. We've seen a number of institutions that have gone outside of the we call traditional athletic director role, with folks bringing folks in from maybe from a private sector, maybe from a professionalized role, changing, titles like CEO or something else, right? I might be missing one or two of them. But I do think that it is high time to make sure that we delineate and understand, and quite frankly, evaluate what we do on a regular basis. I gave you a little bit of snippet about the fact that as you kind of look at the college landscape, things have changed. So you do definitely have to continue that business mantra, that ability to raise revenues, to build facilities, to understand the business side of the enterprise of college athletics. So that's always been there, and and never more that it needs to happen now by virtue of the resources that are necessary, especially with the NIL and the rev share side of it. So as a practitioner, as a director of athletics now, my focus has really shifted. And you do have to adapt to that need. What I would caution folks is to take a look at having a pure individual coming in with no higher education background, maybe not really understanding the fact that, okay, you came from an environment that's more business related, but understanding the culture around higher education, the academy, the ability to understand higher education as a business, okay, as an enterprise, and just treating it purely like maybe a pro operation. I think that is risky, and I think the data tells that some of those individuals who have done that have not been very overly successful, and maybe even now no longer in the job, in the role. I do think that we need to take the old with the new and create the now. I've always said that. And part of that is that the best practices that have worked, okay, they need to be adaptable. And then the new practices that we're taking a look at, and we've heard things like private equity, private capital. We've talked about streamlining certain operations. I think those are important components of being a CEO, a director of athletics, or whatever the hell you want to call them, right? But I do think you need to have the ability to generate excitement and innovation to continue to move. This House case has now put certain requirements in place relative to understanding that resources are going to be necessary. Can you count on the institution to generate those particular those resources 100%? The answer is no. You're going to have to go external. You're going to have to make sure that philanthropy and the business side of the operations of developing those resources are intact. So you're going to have to think outside of the box of that, right? But if you abandon some of the things that have worked within the academy, as well as being a sitting athletic director, you run the risk of exposing yourself. And I had a mentor who used to tell me all the time, he said, any sport can get you fired, Sean, from gymnastics to cross country to football, it doesn't matter. Take your eyes off of the operational pieces of that, and you will find out soon enough that it's very important to be able to be all things to all people to all sports. And that sport administration component is really critical. So again, you might look at a chief revenue officer. That's some of the catchphrases. You may look at somebody who has sports administration experience as a part of the team. So I think you really need to open yourself up to understand this is a very complex operation. The need for resources are definitely there, but to abandon what has worked or what has the professionals that are doing the work, the practitioners, is a risky proposition, especially because of the number of sports and other operations and other things that are going on within an athletic department. So I always caution chancellors and presidents and ADs. I do think there's room for everyone. I do think it's situational. And I also think it's from as we're taking a look at the evolvement of college athletics, as we continue to evolve, you still need to have people who have the necessary expertise in these areas. And then we're adding these new things and taking from the professional side of things and other places to make sure that we are not on news at 11 or you are maybe have something happening that you probably didn't want to happen because of the lack of sophistication and education in that area. So I hit you with a lot, but it's definitely time for change. And anyone sitting back saying that, hey, we're going to do it this way and that's the way it's going to be, or we're going to switch it to all the way to the left or to the right, that's not the answer. The answer is getting and sitting down and talking about the needs of the institution and then adding those pieces as we go.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of things that triggered things in my head. I mean, earlier when you talked about the organization, like the pro model only has one sport. Well, you are starting to see like ownership groups might have, they might have their WNBA, their NBA, they might have their NHL team, but still, you're only talking about three, maybe four organization or sports organizations inside of like even an ownership group. Because I mean, I know here from the Pacer Sports and Entertainment, they also have like a G League team, and so like you're starting to see that spread out, but like then you triple that, and then you have basically your small end athletic department at like 12 to 14 teams. But the other thing about the positions is from studying, literature long ago, I remember about like the Texases of the world and other schools that had like they had their male sports athletic director and they had their female sports athletic director. And by
Mhm.
no means am I saying or suggesting we go back to that, but what I wonder is when you see things happen like at certain schools that they're building such a team for this new revenue model and pro model, you're starting to see some more like, yes, outsiders, but I'm just thinking about are we bringing in people to still run the normal athletic department, but then as like the deputy or the number two, they're running like your what you think your traditional, and then you have this other senior staff that is really thinking big picture. Like I'm thinking just, you know, that might be a way that some people are looking at it. It's like, hey, you're going to focus on big picture stuff. You've been an athletic director before. We're going to bring you into this P4 school and you're going to run the athletic department. You'll report to me, but you are, almost everything besides high level stuff is now going to be them. I'm just wondering if they're just adding an extra layer on top of the college model instead of, and that kind of realizes that, yes, the smallest things can get you fired. But you're like, okay, well, this person's going to report directly to me. And so you kind of look at that. That's kind of like the university president model of their cabinet. Okay, think about everything going on underneath them. They can't manage everything, but they're still responsible for everything. And so
Right.
I wonder if that's more the approach people are going because um, it is risky, but it might be the new model. I mean, you're seeing kind of two different approaches. You could be the Michigan States of the world, where Jay Batt, is just building like a super team of administrators. Like I feel like there's been like five hires in the last couple months, and then North Carolina, I think another decent approach is, yeah, they decided to go external, but they're given a long runway with Bubba. And if anyone can teach that outsider about the higher education and the politics of an institution, it's going to be Bubba Cunningham. And so maybe that is, I think the interesting thing, not to keep it with Power Four, but like we can talk about USF too with their CEO, and I was just there. But it'll be interesting to see what like Oklahoma does. I mean, is Oklahoma, what's Charlotte going to do? I mean, Charlotte made it sound like they wanted an outsider, and will it work? I don't know, but I feel like we're starting to see like this blend of people trying to come up with these creative ideas of how to manage athletics now, and that's what kind of the vibe I get from just hearing what you just said.
Yeah, no, I think it's important also too. I think that's well said. I think if we're just going to throw money at it, okay, and I don't want to trivialize that because we do need resources, and I think it at our place, I think it caught up to us that we were doing a lot less. We're doing a lot more with less. Excuse me, but in this era, it's caught up to us. And this particular football year is a great example of that. Being outspent in NIL and rev share, it is what it is. We don't complain about it. We just kind of adapt. But now we're starting to see, losing 16 players, losing players. Goodness sakes, we lost to Toledo, and we had a player that ran the ball back for a kickoff, and he started with us. So you're going to see this more and more. So these are the realities of it. But going back to my point relative to the money, if it was all about the money, there would be lot more institutions winning championships. People are spending lots of money, millions of dollars, and they're not getting those results. So you need to say why. I gave you 30, 40, $50 million and you haven't won a championship. Henceforth, the reason why we've seen head coaches starting to get fired in week 3 and week 4, because now the reality is that the accountability effect is in place. So I think it's important to understand that throwing money at it, okay, no one likes more money than me, but the reality is that that's not the only thing that you need to consider as you're putting that team together. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it's
Yeah.
important to use the money wisely and to make sure that it's well placed because you can spend a lot of money, have no resources, and those institutions know who they are. We're not one of them. And I would just tell you that that's why it's important to evaluate the practitioner role, the enterprise as it is for higher education, and the ability to execute at a high level based on your evaluation of talent, as well as accountability there. So I think that's where I caution folks to go and get somebody and then want something different where you might have, you've cut a corner in a key area, especially in higher education.
Yeah, and I forget who talked to me about this, but we talk about the outside hire and the reason why it might not keep happening, which it hasn't happened as often as people think. Oh, there's been some splash hires, and that kind of made it like even Rob Higgins. I mean, he had worked at USF Athletics before. It's just he had a 20-year gap, but and it was a very special case. I would say an outlier,
Now
but
let me cut you off. He's different though. He's
oh yeah,
always been a part of that team. First of all, Rob is, I know him very well. We put together the Division 1 men's ice hockey championship and down in Tampa, and he
he
was one
talked
of the
about that. He talked about it.
he's the guy. So he is different. That's why I think it can be done, but he is an outlier. I don't see him as an outside entity. I see him as an internal. And USF got extremely, really lucky to have somebody who's really the insider that looks like he's an outsider, but he's a perfect fit for that role because he's not the traditional, I know nothing about higher ed or USF or what's going on. And he ran a very, very excellent organization with that Tampa Bay Sports Commission. Its history and its track record. So they hit oil. It was in their
Oh yeah,
backyard and they hit oil. So that one's probably different than some of these
yep.
others that are proposed because they're not tested like a Rob Higgins. So I think it's important to make sure we demystify that because people will look at that and say, oh, they got a CEO. Yeah, do your research. You have to do your research and understand how things fit for your institution. That's a key issue.
Yeah, and I talked about that in my video about the Charlotte opening, and then I do caution people like, search firms too that want to. Someone says I want to win the press conference with an outside hire and go a pro model. Like, be careful what you wish for, because the other thing is the administrators that are doing the day-to-day work that we're bringing bits and pieces of the pro model, right? Like ticketing and things like that. Like you're getting some of this stuff, and then now you're dealing with NIL, and so there's money, and you're kind of balancing the house settlement money. So you're going to get this pro model sprinkled into these traditional athletic administrators, and so as this continues to shift, you're going to see athletic administrators know more about pro model than the pro people know about higher ed model, and then I think you're going to see the blending of everyone adapts, right? I mean, it's like college athletic directors 30 years ago were former coaches
Hmm.
only. And, now it's like, yeah, there were business and compliance and legal backgrounds. Yes, we're probably going back to the fundraiser model where most ADs are
Hmm.
fundraisers. Uh, Presidents calling specifically for that, like Austin P. State's president. It's like saying that's a non-negotiable. So you're gonna start to see that, but that's a trend. But yeah, so I just think the external thing is hyped up a little bit, and that's part of my dissertation topic is the future of AD hires, and so I'm closely monitoring that. Um, this question is one I've been adding in. I usually try to come up with a topical question. So this one's sponsored by AD Vantage, a new partner that I'm working with. What metrics do you look for in a head coach search? You can take whatever sport comes to mind and whether it's different, but things I'm kind of wondering, do people like conference, winning percentage more than they want their regular season? And how you kind of evaluate looking for a head coach?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that's also another thing that as you take as a practitioner versus someone coming from the outside. Now, one can say, well, we have search firms; they can help to do that. I would say, yeah, that's true. But again, the principal job of an AD, and quite frankly, a chancellor president is to make sure that we can assess talent, and that talent when it comes in, that it fits, that it's not going to compromise standards of the institution, which is a key issue. Okay, especially now where we've got multi-million dollars involved in these hires, and it does depend, right? From football to cross country, there are some key things that go across all lines. So what I like to look at is somebody that's had success, not just success X's and O's, but academically, the ability to interact with donor groups and different stakeholders, the ability to deal with the community in a way where it's engaging, the ability to articulate, communicate, the ability to sell a message. There's a lot that I take a look at because I need this person as a partner to be able to help me and to the institution inspire hope. That's basically what we're doing. When you're a head coach, it's different than being an assistant coach, an OC or a DC, especially in football, because you're actually the ones doing the heavy lifting and inspiring hope and leading and being able to articulate and communicate the mission, the vision, the goals of the institution. So I have to be able to see that person representing the institution at hand. And doing it, not just X's and O's, not just a ball coach. I remember Coach Alvarez used to say that all the time. Now, he's a ball coach. And I understood, I got it after year 2 or 3 about what that looked like. The other pieces needed to also be developed. The ability to stand in front of a donor group, the ability to communicate the needs and wants, the ability to execute in front of the student athletes, 18 to 25-year-olds. Those are all pieces that I need to have samples and data sets around so I can see them in those different capacities. And search firms do a good job of collecting that data. That was very time consuming. That was me in the back room trying to help out Coach Alvarez or someone else to do and flying around and trying to figure out all the different things, the skeletons and all that in the background. So I do have enough personal experience to take a look at that, but I really like those quality controls. Those are quality controls for me. Okay. I have to see that. And then the other piece of it is really understanding that, do you want to be here? Do you just want to take this as a job? Is this a place you really want to be? Outside of the money, very few people are going to say, I'm going to say no to a multi-million dollar deal as a head coach, right? Very few. But why are you doing this? What's the end game? How do you see yourself? What about your family? We go through all of those particular components of it, right? The wins and losses are very important statistically, both home and away, and large institution, small institution. I get all that. But at the end of the day, if I'm talking to you, you're probably a pretty good coach
Oh
in
yeah.
the X's and O's. I'm not wasting your time. You're not wasting mine. But at the end of the day, can you execute? Can you adjust with personnel? Do you have a scheme and you fit players to the scheme, or vice versa? You have a scheme that the players have to fit that scheme. These are all things that I'm trying to assess, right? Things have changed. Used to be, maybe in a certain situation, I'm not going to hire a defensive coach, maybe an offensive coach. We go back and forth on that. I think the success piece for or measuring stick for a head coach really is about the effectiveness in all of these different quality control areas that I've just kind of rolled out to you. And then being in the moment, able to, can I put this individual in front of my president, my chancellor, my board of regents, my board of trustees? What do I don't know about you? I want you to be able to articulate that.
Do you think
So
with
those are all those are all pieces. Excuse me. Those are all pieces that I think need to be a part of the evaluation process before you even get to the hire.
Yeah, and I agree. All those things I've worked with like probably not thousands, many hundreds of coaches over my career in athletics with academics and compliance. And I have some that you can kind of almost tell like who's a good fit, and then also who might of the assistants might be a head coach at some point. Like it was always interesting to kind of like just talk to those people. But level of where they're at. We saw this trend in basketball, where I was at Indiana State with Josh Schertz, and he came in in Indiana State probably should have made the March Madness. It was really the biggest example of a college basketball roster getting ripped away in the NIL era.
Hmm.
Great basketball team. He leaves and goes to a D1, but he got to Indiana State or got to an A10 school. But he got to Indiana State from D2, and he was dominant in D2. IU Indianapolis, put up 100 and something points against Ohio State, and then just lost a game, putting up 94, I think, last night to another team because they run this offense that worked in Division Two. As you know, they so we saw this model, right? It's like, can that translate? Well, yes, it can. Um, do you think the level of where a coach comes from in different sports, are you more likely to look at a head coach maybe at an FCS or a D2 program for some sports versus maybe a high major or like a Power Four assistant that hasn't had those experiences? Because a lot of the things you just talked about, you look at a program builder, the level might not matter as much if they're going against like-minded competition and peers in their conference, right?
Yeah, no, I think you got you got a great example of that in your home state with Signetti in
Yeah.
IU.
Yes, I've tried to balance out how often I reference. I've been an IU. I'm an IU guy, and I tell people, I was just at Florida on vacation. I had my IU shorts on. They're like, "Oh yeah, how long you been an IU fan?" I was like, "Man, I've been an IU fan for like 25 years. I've lived through a lot of 2-win seasons, so don't be trying to paint me as a
Yeah,
bandwagon." But I
yeah,
agree, Scott knocked it out of the park with that hire, and
he did.
it made a
He
lot of
did.
sense if you look at the program building aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think that that's the difference. Is it a program build, or are you coming in to maintain the amount of excellence that you've had? There's a couple. One would say, so two different ways to look at that. What's harder? I think they're both hard, to be perfectly. Sustaining consistent success is hard, but also building it when you never had it ever, or it's been very limited. Go back to Barry Alvarez and what he did for Wisconsin. And then look what's happening now. You've got to evaluate all those different things, and I think it's important to understand. I think that the real issue there is knowing your institutional needs, and then understanding that you could probably find that. In the case with us, we brought back an alum with Thomas Hammock. He's had some up and down success. He's been able to do certain things. We've had some adversity. We talked about the resources. We talked about different things. He came in during the COVID era. There was all kind of stuff, but we had been flying pretty high across the board. But we're still knocking over, the higher resource institutions. Notre Dame being the most recent last year. So at the end of the day, it's where your program is and what you are looking for to make sure you maintain or build. But I've had lots of success in our Olympic sports with taking Division II in the GLIAC, taking a look at the experiences. I've been as an AD at Division One, two, and three. So
Yep.
I've had experiences of taking a look at Division two coaches, Division three coaches, and seeing them work, and it has worked. Head coaches have been able to take a look at opportunities and say, you know what, I'm not probably ready to go here, but I'm going to build this thing here. And then all of a sudden, just like what's happening at IU, just was what happened at Kansas, from Buffalo to Whitewater, all of these particular coaches that are out there, it's about evaluating and knowing that they exist. Now, on the flip side of that, taking a high major assistant in a basketball or football and not being able to understand now that if that individual can do it with lower resources at a school like NIU or maybe a Division two or Division three, that could be more of a risk if that individual does not have some of those experiences. It's kind of tough. I remember going to Wisconsin. I came from Merrimack College, which is now Division one. That was a Division two and a Division one in ice hockey. But I had been at these other lower resource institutions. So when I went to Wisconsin, it was almost like having, a money tree in the backyard. So I was always looking at cost containment components no matter what I did because of my experience. But it's hard for me to kind of, people look at my resume and they say, well, you're a University of Alabama grad. How much money did you really didn't have? You know what I'm saying? But how were you operationalizing it? Well, most of my administrative career, but not as a student athlete, has been at lower resource institutions. Wisconsin's probably my largest resource institution I've been at. And I use in between when I was at University of Maine and Wisconsin. So it's a perfect fit. But I think to answer your question directly, it's about the fit and then your due diligence on understand people's backgrounds and how they can fit your institution.
Yeah, and I'll just end that question with my own thought from someone that's not an AD. But I think if it's I've been at D2 schools where it's situational because if you have a really good coach either retire or move on, okay, well if you're dominating and you're leaving on good terms, you've had the same assistant for 5 to 10 years.
Mhm.
You see these leadership. So we'd have at University of Indianapolis, we had such dominant. I think we had a men's basketball, baseball, and football all in the same like 2 years where the coaches left, and we just moved. Two retired, one went to his alma mater D1 school, and then we just promoted the assistant because it made perfect sense. They were dominant and they were
Correct.
around forever. Then you have I've had other ADs on where they'll either say on air or off air is, if I'm at a power school or even a, high resource G6 school, I can't afford to take a risk on hiring an assistant because
Correct.
I need someone that I don't have to worry about all the details of running that program. And that's when you might start seeing like limiting. I'm going to go get a head coach that's been there before. And so yes, we have this coaching carousel right now, which is just uh, interesting to see how it plays out. Um, so as we wind down, I got two questions left for you. One of them, this is not me trying like a journalistic approach. I'm just naturally curious. But what do you think G6 ADs or yourself think about the CFP situation right now? The
Mm.
rankings are out. So we're recording this in early to mid-November. So we've only had one ranking, and we don't have anyone in the top 25 that were a G5 or G6 school. And so, what are your thoughts on that? And then I'm wondering, is this going to increase the appetite? There was this private equity talk about FCS playoffs. Is this like increase the appetite, you think, for like, what if we did just do a playoff model for the G5? Because that seems like it'd be better financial decision than bowl games in the future. You still want to have the chance to go to the CFP, but I mean, it's kind of like the NIT can be successful in basketball.
Mm.
All right, and that's including everyone. But I don't know. Like it just seems like if I was a AD, I'd be upset about the ranking, and then I'd also be like, we're all scraping for the. We're saying we're all scraping for this one spot, and then we'll be happy to go play a bowl game. I mean, I don't know.
Well, you're baiting me because you know for a fact that that I brought some of this up in the past, and I appreciate you doing that. But yeah, I think there's some consternation as we're putting more resources in college football, especially at the FBS level. People are looking for a return, right? So the reality is that, back in 16, 17, I can't remember now, it gets a little bit foggy. I talked about a G5 playoff, right? Not to uh, negate the CFP at that time, four got the nod. It was an attempt to give our division or our size institution a shot for a real championship, and not just something that says, okay, yeah, you can compete if you go undefeated or if you had a strength of schedule, which were all unrealistic. And I can say that as an Alabama grad. I do think that now with the expansion component and the fact that, Cincinnati got in during the playoffs era, so it did happen. It's hard for me to refute that. But the reality is that without the strength of schedule, without some of the metrics that are now being evaluated, eye test included, that it's going to be really tough for institutions that do not have a certain schedule or play against ranked opponents to be able to get access to that playoff, right? So henceforth, There's a need there's a need for a playoff structure or another way to reward those institutions to play for a championship. And I do like the fact, and I still stand by it, that having some type of situation where you have the G6 and you have an ability to play, really good teams against each other with a natural feed in to the college football playoff. That was the plan that I talked about. People like to they wanted to morph it into the little the little people table or the little something table. That's not what I was talking about. I play football, I coach football, and I know it very well. What I was looking for is an opportunity for institutions to subsidize financially their programs. And the way you do that is put on inventory for media and others to be able to pay for it. So this was a way, very similar to the NCAA, of having a way where maybe teams outside of the top 25 or whatever the deal is, and you put together that tournament structure and using the existing bowl structure to fund that. So there is inventory for folks that would spend. And I would happen to know that my fan base and other fan bases that look like mine would love to be engaged in that activity, especially if there was a championship or a way into the CFP to be able to do that. So that just makes sense. How we get that done, I do not know. I know things like week zero and other types of existing bowl structures that maybe not getting the financial dollars around ticket sales and what have you would be a great way to start. And I also think that looking at the ranking now, it's going to be tougher with these mega conferences, especially in the Big Two that we have, the SEC and the Big Ten, able to schedule those high ranked opponents to even get a chance to knock them off are going to be more difficult. Okay. So the committee's already talked about the eye test. It's making the media nutty, right? What's the eye test? They want to be able to pin down the eye test. Well, you're not going to get that answer. What you're going to get is that play somebody and then you'll pass the eye test. Do you see what I'm saying? Beat somebody and then you will pass the eye test. That's the eye test. It's this eye. It's looking in that good eye right there. And that good eye tells me that until we have some type of standardized way to evaluate all college football programs, that you're going to have to go and be able to knock off the big boys, and specifically in the Big Ten and the SEC. And the only way you can do that is providing inventory and financial wherewithal to get there. So that's a long answer to you to say
That's
that
good.
I'm not mad at the CFP in the process because, again, I'm a realist. It is what it is. Okay. We've been talking about it for a long time until you initiate that with the power brokers around creating more access and opportunities and inventory that gives institutions our size a shot to be able to show off that we can do that. I'm quite sure there wasn't a lot of people last year thinking that we had a snowball chance in hell of knocking off the runner-up to the national championship, which was Notre Dame. There's not a lot of people. Only the folks that really knew that were the kids, the coaches, myself, and some very loyal NIU alumni. But we did it, and we can do it again with the right access, opportunity, and resources to do it. So I think that that's the part that you have to believe, and putting guardrails up and giving people an opportunity is the way to do it.
Yeah, and not to mention, people can just write a check and cancel a future game. I mean, you think any P2 or Power 4 opponent wants to play USF or North Texas or
I tell
Memphis? It's like,
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough. I think it also is tough, this, right? It's tough because not all conferences are made the same. I think that's what people are trying to say as far as the level of competition week in and week out. And I agree with you. That's why our non-con conference is always a gauntlet. We played, we played some real tough opponent this year. We played Maryland, who happened to be a really good opponent this year with their offense, the way they did, and then same thing with Mississippi State. But in years past, we played on the big boys. Those first 4 weeks are really important for us to be able to get those wins and to show the nation. And then we go into our con, and then that's when we fall off because of the level of competition that the people that assess our league tell us that that wasn't good enough. So this is a way when you take a look at a postseason opportunity to be able to knock off some people. North Texas is a good example, USF, Memphis. There are institutions now, UNLV, I can go on and on with that, that are quite frankly ready at a level where if you line up against them, you can get punched in the mouth. You could lose, you will lose, and that gives an opportunity to continue the thing going. Boise has proved it from year in and year out. So I think it's important to understand that to make this game, this is the greatest game in the world. That's the way I look at it. But to make it right and to be legitimate, you must provide access and you must provide some level of respect for those institutions who have, quite frankly, spent the money to be in this atmosphere, in this ecosystem.
Yeah, and I know I'm talking about football a lot. You played and coached. Um, I was a 1-7 fourth grade football coach this year, and so what do I know about football? But it just makes a lot of sense. I was around for D2 football playoffs, FCS football playoffs, and they were great experiences, and I enjoyed them, and I know the athletes enjoyed them more than the athletes I watched play in bowl games that weren't leading to anything. So, well, with that said, I want to end it on a scenario advice question.
Good.
So imagine, congratulations, you are 30 years old again. Today in college athletics, you're a rising administrator at the FBS level. You want to become the AD at some point. What sort of extras can someone do to stick out? And so the reason I mention this is I was getting a lot of times I just say, "What advice did you give?" And it was always the most obvious one: do the best job at the job you have, and people will pay attention. Well, that doesn't make for great podcast feedback. And so I've had to bend it a little bit. So I'm thinking besides the above and beyond, but I'm thinking more like things like out of office learning or networking. Like, I mentioned to Jamie Boggs, I think I was like, someone could just slowly pick and choose to be a thought leader on LinkedIn. They could get LinkedIn
Mhm.
Premium and talk about their own role without giving away any details. But like, not everyone can go to Cal's. They don't let me go to Cal's. I've tried. So you can't go to everything. So how do you stick out if you're in your mid-level manager administrator? And how do you kind of progress? How would you map out like the next like 5 to 10 years before you got that chance?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that first of all, let me see if I can get you to Cal's. All right, I have a couple of friends, so let's see if
Yeah,
we can
just
get
gotta
you to
return some
Cal's.
emails, man.
We'll see what we can. I just gotta put that out there because I love access and opportunity. I don't care who you are. If you're hungry and you want to be a part of this organization, this enterprise, you should have access to it. I'm a firm believer of that. But to answer the question directly, I really do believe that it's about putting together that network of individuals. And you did it. We didn't know each other from Adam's Tomcat. You're right. You went to me. You asked a question. I started to, before I take any meetings or whatever, I like to research people. Who is this individual? What is he about? What is she about? Let me do my own research, and I did. So I think it's important to be able to have your work speak for yourself. I think that's also very important to your point that you opened up with. But I also think it's important for you to do some research around who's out there, who's doing these things. Okay, who's in it and who's been able to be consistently uh, um, uh, uh, at least quoted or been a part of the educational part of the industry. I think that's a key component because there's a bunch of people who are imposters. Yeah, you probably know who they are. And then there's a bunch of people who really have done great work for the greater good of the enterprise. And when I say it that way, it's not as a slight. It says, okay, what do you stand for? Why are you doing what you do? How did you get to where you are? What are some of the trends we need to take a look at? These are all questions that should be something that you should be able to answer for the individual that you are not trying to engage or to be like. Okay. I think sports management programs do a great job in that. And there's a lot of great ones out there. But I think it's important for you as an individual to reach out, seek out individuals within the profession that really exemplify where you want to go as a career. I've had lots of folks that have sat back over years say, I've been following you for 10, 15 years, and then finally got to see me. And my question to them was, well, why didn't you just pick up the phone or the email and just say, hey, Mr. Frazier, or, Sean, I saw you at this, and you'd be surprised. Our industry, we have great people in our industry. People want to give back. People want to throw the rope back over the fence to help others, regardless of race, creed, religion, what have you. Inherently, we want the profession to be the best it can. So what I would say is you need to start now. Your story resonated with me about where you are, what happened with you in your career. That's really powerful for me. I'm an educator first before I'm anything else. And if I am who I say I am, which, some days is different, if I want to be that person to help and move the industry along, I need to make sure the next generation of individuals or the individuals who are trying to get into the career understand the way to do it the right way. Okay. The right way for me anyway. Right. So I think that's important, is to seek out those individuals within the industry that have done some things that you admire or feel that it was creative, or do you feel that really are going to emulate some of the things you want to do within the profession. That's job one. The other one is, going back to your thing, when you're looking for different positions, understanding the pathway, what that looks like from facilities, compliance, fundraising, I can go on and on. You need to be a student of higher education. I have to go back to that. I think it's important and incumbent to folks to understand, if you're going to be a college administrator, you need to understand the academy, and you need to be respectful of the things that are going on in higher ed. So I think that's a key component. So it's like me going into the aerospace industry and not knowing anything about rocket ships or planes or what have you. I'm going to have to learn a little bit to be able to be within the entry level capacity. So I think it's nuts to feel that everything is transferable if you don't have the basis of understanding within the academy and higher ed. I'm not saying you have to be a theorist or go back and get multiple degrees like I have done to understand the whole process. But I do think you need to be somewhat knowledgeable about college athletics and higher education specifically, so you can navigate the process, because it is very complex to some degree. The book that I almost fell asleep on but then engage every day, The Harvard Century, it talks about shared governance. Was it a read that you want to have on the beach? No, for me, but it was a necessary understanding of higher education shared governance that
Oh
has
man,
helped
I've
me.
got you said the two words shared governance. So next week I got my I'm defending my quals exam,
Well, there you go.
my oral quals, and my topic, the first topic is faculty governance and shared governance and the history of it. So
There you go.
I've got about 10 books behind me on that topic that my weekend is going to be full of that. But
Good,
yeah, being a student of it, also shameless plug for D1AD hiring trends and tracker on higherathletics.com.
good,
Become a
good.
student of the game, you know?
That's
I
right.
totally agree. That's the biggest thing. I feel like people don't understand higher education. I knew 5 years ago when I got into my doctorate, I intentionally I think a sport management doctorate would have been a lot easier for me. Both my degrees were in that, so I needed to diversify. I did the higher education doctorate and got a lot of funny looks whenever I'm just in there with a bunch of student affairs people. Um,
That's
but
okay.
people just need to, people just need to become a student, like you said, I think.
That's right. Now, I think though it's a respect factor. One thing to learn about it, but to respect it. And that's the first thing I did at Wisconsin. The shared governance model was one that was very intense, and I had not seen until I got to Wisconsin. So I said, you know what? Let's go get a degree. Let me understand it. And I had a bunch of student affairs folks that were in it, but it really helped me to understand shared governance. And I've had some great professors and great friends, and it's really been my secret sauce to a lot of different things that have gone on in my career. But I think that's important. So we're going through another shift to end the discussion. We're going through another shift now. Now this is totally new. And we have been a part of a trend. This trend of, putting our football program in the transfer portal, so to speak, and then making sure that we're more regional with our Olympic sports. It's something that fits for NIU. It might not fit for everybody, but it's because of us understanding and being self-aware about who we are as an institution where this is working, both financially as well as not compromising standards. That came from understanding the higher education side, the academy, the ability to compete both academically and athletically. So I think that that's why a lot of times, because a lot of people say they don't think about, okay, you took your football program, but then you went someplace else. That's because I'm understanding higher ed, shared governance, the understanding of the institution in the college landscape, specifically a public institution. So I think that's why it's important to be well educated and self-aware about those things, and then going after those particular pieces that help your portfolio. So when you do get that job, you're going to be able to really excel and be able to do some things that others, quite frankly, are going to sit back and say, "Well, how did you know to do that?" And I think that's important why to do that research and to be very analytical about your process and your career.
Sean Frazier, Northern Illinois University, Vice President of Athletics. Thank you for joining me on Higher Ed Athletics. It's been a fun discussion.
Appreciate it, Travis. Best of luck to you, brother.